Nigel, I mean, in all the time you've been in politics, have you ever known a situation like this? And do you have any idea, really, how this now plays out?
Well, the answer, of course, is no. These are extraordinary circumstances. I mean, what you've got, I think probably for the first time in the history of our nation, is a parliament that just point blank refuses to accept the will of the people. You know, we voted for Brexit, we backed it up in a general election the following year, and a majority of the House of Commons don't want it. Where do we go from here, Piers? Well, I mean, the first point to make, of course, is that if the Prime Minister had any sense of honour, she would resign this morning, having led us to this total debacle. But of course, she won't. Under the legislation, 500 MPs voted for Article 50. It said explicitly that if we don't get a withdrawal agreement, we just leave on March the 29th. That was backed up by the Referendum Act, which also says we just leave on March the 29th. And that would mean leaving in 72 days' time on WTO terms. Now, clearly, there'd be a lot of work to do. That's what the law says. However, let me be honest with you. I do not believe that Mr Bercow, as Speaker, and our Parliament will allow that to happen. If you want my prediction, I think what's going to happen is the Article 50 leaving date is going to be extended.
Yeah. Nigel Farage, you said earlier that Parliament doesn't want to deliver the will of the people and deliver Brexit, but what you had last night was a really odd situation where actually, we saw this morning, Ian Duncan-Smith, you know, one of those Brexiteers who voted against this withdrawal agreement because not only do Remainers disagree with it, but Brexiteers disagree with it as well, because this isn't the Brexit that they feel that they voted for. The fact of the matter is there isn't one form of Brexit that Brexiteer MPs feel unites them.
Oh, look, if you look at the referendum campaign, you know, every leading player in the Leave campaign was explicit. We should leave the European Union, leave the customs union, and leave the single market. I was quite prepared to accept compromises in the withdrawal agreement, not getting perhaps everything I wanted on day one, but actually what we got was a Prime Minister sort of almost trying to please both sides. You know, on the one hand, we leave the treaty, but on the other, we stay tied to the customs union. And the problem with the withdrawal agreement is it actually resembled a surrender document of a nation that had been beaten in war. It was that bad because we indefinitely could have been stuck inside the customs union. So it was interesting actually last night on College Green to see the protesters on both sides of the argument united in their opposition to Mrs May's deal.
I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it, Nigel, that you can wake up to front pages, the most devastating front pages imaginable for any sitting Prime Minister, the worst possible result imaginable that we've ever seen for a sitting Prime Minister, and yet she's just calmly carrying on as if none of this is really happening.
It is absolutely bizarre. And Piers, can I say what it's doing for our standing in the world? You know, the rest of the world is looking on with incredulity at what they think is a great country being led so badly in such a shambolic way. So it's not good for our standing in the world. It's not good for investment into Britain. We need a resolution. There is a way out. It is the legislation. We should leave on March the 29th. I still hope and pray that happens, but I fear, as I said, that we're going to get an extension of Article 50, and what you will hear are voices in Westminster pushing hard for a second referendum, even though there is no real will for it out there in the country.
I've always thought, from the start of all this, that the only way you really get anywhere with this is if the person in charge of driving this for the country is a Brexiteer. You know, someone like you or Boris Johnson or Jacob Rees-Mogg or whatever. We still have a Remainer who voted Remain in Theresa May, and we now are where we are.
Yeah, but also you've got in cabinet, you've got Michael Gove in cabinet, who's a leading campaigner for Brexit, and he backed the withdrawal agreement and May's deal. So again, I say the Brexiteers, even if you want a Brexiteer as driver of the train, Brexiteers do not agree on the same.
I agree. But here's my point: is there time, Nigel Farage, to parachute a Brexiteer in to replace Theresa May if she did fall on her political sword? Is there time for a Brexiteer to get back in the room with the EU and try and screw a deal which pleases people like you?
Do you know something? One thing the EU is good at is 11th hour negotiations. I'm utterly convinced, and I've worked in business, so it sort of helps with these negotiations. If a new Prime Minister came in, went to Brussels and said, "We are leaving," at 11 p.m. on March the 29th on WTO terms, within 48 hours, the European Union would come back to us because of pressure from the German car industry, the French wine industry, the Belgian chocolate industry. And they'd come back to us. Do you know what, Piers? They'd bite our arms off and we'd finish up leaving with a sensible free trade arrangement. There is still time. Brexit's not the problem. This Prime Minister is. She needs to go.
I voted Remain, but I completely agree with this. I think the problem is they look at Theresa May, they know she's basically a dead woman walking as Prime Minister. She's not going to be there for much longer, whatever happens. They've seen this drubbing in the Commons, and they don't believe her when she threatens no deal because they know she doesn't want a no deal, because she doesn't want to have that noose round her neck if it comes to it. So they've got us right where they want us. But if a hard Brexit person was in charge, I think they could look the EU in the eyes and the EU would be panicky. They would believe that a Brexiteer meant it. And that's been the problem, I think, for 2 years.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I have to say, Piers, I'm about to go in the chamber and speak, and I'm going to say to Mr Barnier this morning, you've got us where you want us, because he knows that all the while Mrs May stays as Prime Minister, the likelihood is we'll head towards a second referendum. So it's up to Conservative members of Parliament that believe in Brexit, that want to honour the will of the referendum and stand up for their constituents, to be brave today, just as Tory MPs were all those years ago in 1940, getting rid of Neville Chamberlain.
Okay.
This is a major moment in British history.
I don't know how much you feel you have in common with your MEP colleague Daniel Hannan, but he tweeted last night, I think pure EFTA, European Free Trade Area, no pluses, might just get majority support. It would leave Britain in the single market and with free movement of labour, but outside the common agricultural policy, fishing policy, customs union, foreign and defence policies, criminal justice policies, etc. Again, a leading light in the Brexit campaign with a completely different idea, particularly on freedom of movement, to you. But do you think that a proposal like that could actually be the way forward?
It is possible within the EFTA treaty that we could do something about freedom of movement. It's not guaranteed. I think what Daniel Hannan's doing and others are doing, they're all desperately trying to find a way forward. All I can say is anything is better than saying to the British people, we don't respect your vote. So if we can find ways forward, let's find them. But the obvious one isn't to go and negotiate with EFTA. The obvious one is to respect the law of the land. As it stands right now, the Withdrawal Act says we leave on March the 29th. That is what we need to do. I'm losing faith that our government and Parliament will do it, but that is what we need to do, and it's the only way now that Brexit can actually be delivered on the day.
OK, we don't want it running past March the 29th for one big reason. It's my birthday on the 30th of March, and I have extensive celebrations planned.
Oh, God.
So I hope the national interest
Sorry, what was the date
ahead
again?
of my birthday. Put it in your diary.